Hello and welcome to the Future You webinar run by Prospects. Today we're focusing on postgrad study. I'm your host, Emily Slade, the host of the Future You podcast. And this afternoon, our panel are going to answer some prepared questions around postgrad study. After the questions, Charlie Ball is going to give us a short presentation on the current job market. We'll then have time for an open Q&A. So if you do think of any questions throughout the session, please pop them in the Q&A box and we'll address them at the end. For more career advice, articles, videos, and podcast episodes, head to prospects.ac.uk to register for free. Let's now meet our panel. If you'd like to introduce yourself, Jen.
Hi, my name's Jen Reynolds. I work at Heriot-Watt University as a postgraduate student recruitment officer.
Darcy?
Hi, I'm Darcy. I'm an editor at Prospect, and I also did my Master of Arts in International Multimedia Journalism at Newcastle University. I graduated in 2023.
Perfect. Eva?
Hello, my name is Eva Licho. I am a student immigration officer at the University of Oxford, and I just finished my master's at the same university like a month ago in applied linguistics.
Amazing. And Charlie?
Hi, I'm Charlie. I am the higher education sector's in-house labour market expert, and I have a master's and a PhD, but I did them in the olden days.
Back in black and white. Perfect. So let's dive in. So what motivated you to pursue a master's or PG diploma, and how did you know it was the right time? Darcy, if we start with you.
Yeah, so I was actually in the final year of my undergraduate and I saw a scholarship advertised in a journalism course, and I did English literature undergrad. So obviously that's quite a broad course after graduating. And I knew I wanted to go down some sort of writing path, but probably not fiction. That wasn't really where my skills lay. So looked into the course, thought it sounded like something I'd be really interested in. And then again, it was just kind of specialising from something so broad as English, where you can go off into loads of different paths. I wanted to sort of deepen my expertise in one area, and I chose journalism.
Fantastic. And Eva?
For me, so I studied psychology for my undergraduate degree, and my dissertation combined psychology with linguistics. And that's when I realized I actually really like linguistics. So then I was not actually sure what I wanted to do, because up until that point, I was focusing on another aspect of my course, so social psychology. And then I decided to work for a year and figure out what it is that I want to do afterwards. So while I was working, I was looking up courses that I thought, might be good for me. And the courses that really stood out for me were the linguistics ones. So I ended up only applying for applied linguistics masters because I thought that was a great opportunity for me to learn more about linguistics and then how I can actually apply this in practice in terms of learning and teaching foreign languages. And again, combining my knowledge of psychology and then integrating that into my linguistics degree. Yeah.
Fantastic. So how did you fund your studies, and what advice would you give to others exploring financial options? So Jen, if we come to you.
Yeah, so I just wanted to give kind of a perspective from a student recruitment point of view, just to say that there are government loans available to fund your studies. So all nations, Scotland, England, Ireland, Northern Ireland and Wales have their own government funding. And there's also scholarships and bursaries available that people can have a look at throughout all different universities, so it's worth checking. And if you are in the workplace at the minute, it's also worth seeing if your organisation has any budget for upskilling staff. So just to give a few kind of tips there, but I will obviously, you'll get better insight from students themselves, so I'll pass that on now. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. So Darcy, how did you fund your studies?
Yeah, so I mentioned that I had a scholarship. This was privately funded by a donor to the university, so previous alumni. So that meant that I actually got like a cash scholarship rather than fees paid. So I used the government loan, as Jen was just talking about. So I still had maintenance loan, and my tuition fee covered, but then I also had, that extra bit of cash on the side, which really helped with living costs. But then I also worked part-time, so I kind of had a few income streams coming in just to give me a bit of security, so I could focus more on my studies and didn't have to worry about paying rent.
Yeah, absolutely. So what advice would you give to someone torn between entering the workforce now or continuing with further study? Eva, we'll start with you.
I would say don't be scared to take a break from studying, because I think this is what scares students the most, finishing university and then, oh, I need to continue with this now. If I do it later, then it's too late. Actually, no, it's not too late. It's never too late. So don't be afraid to try out things. If that's working somewhere, volunteering, just trying to get some experience to explore different things you might enjoy and things you might not enjoy. That can give you a lot of clarity, and can also help you decide what master's or PhD or whatever it is you want to pursue after your degree. More specifically, because while you're studying the undergraduate degree, you might have several ideas and you might think, oh, I'm really set on this one thing. But actually, once you're done with your degree and you have plenty of time to explore different options, you might realize that there's something else that you might enjoy more. And if you manage to get experience in that, then that'll be really important in determining what you're going to do next.
Perfect. And Charlie, what advice would you give to someone torn between entering the workforce now or continuing with further study?
So there's a bunch of things to consider. The first thing is some people do take postgraduate study as essentially to avoid a difficult work employment situation and to defer that employment decision. As things stand, and that's a perfectly honourable and a perfectly good reason to actually go on to PG study. As things stand, though, although the labour market is difficult now, the chances are it is likely to be more difficult this time next year, simply due to the way that the economic cycle seems to be proceeding. So you're thinking, I've got to take a master's, take a year out of the jobs market, it'll be better when I come back. Probably won't be, to be honest. However, that doesn't mean don't do it. If you spend that year, and the work has been done, if you spend that year thinking about your options, and you spend the time thinking about your options and really exploring the opportunities for employability. Although the jobs market isn't great at the moment, it's not as bad as the media reports are saying, so that will help. The other thing to bear in mind is, however, university will still be there in the next few years, so you don't have to go right now. You may want to defer entry, or you may want to think about going perhaps when you feel you can benefit from it a little bit more. So there are lots of factors to take into account. You don't have to go right now if you just finished, and as Eva quite rightly said, it can be quite daunting leaving education when you've been in it all of your life. But it'll still be there after you've had a chance to do some other things. So do think about it in those terms as well. It's not a decision that you have to make right now, and it's not an irreversible decision you can't go back on.
Yeah, fantastic. And Jen, what advice would you give someone torn between entering the workforce or continuing with study?
Yeah, similar to the other panelists, just investigate all opportunities. And as everyone has mentioned, we have some postgraduate students that come straight from university. Others go into the workplace first and decide what they want to do from there. For instance, they might want to upskill to accelerate their career, or maybe gain a promotion or a higher salary, or they might want to completely diversify and change career paths. So if you wanted to go out into the workplace for the kind of immediate future, it might give you a better insight into what you want to do. But really, the decision is yours to make, and think about what your end goal is, and that will always kind of help kind of justify your decisions in the short term.
Yeah, absolutely. Jen, we're going to stay with you for what are the main differences between undergrad and postgrad study?
Yeah, so, well, undergraduate degrees, I would say, offers you a broad knowledge of your chosen subject area, and they typically have larger class sizes than postgraduate. And postgraduates with the smaller class sizes, I would say they delve deeper into the subject area, and it gives you a chance to debate and discuss at a deeper level, with more agile teaching, so you can apply what you learn to industry. It can also be a stepping stone towards further study. So if you're interested in PhD, any research opportunities, for instance, some degrees, like engineering degrees, you would need to have it as a postgraduate qualification to be able to progress in your chosen career path. So yeah, it's just kind of honing your skills and delving deeper into the subject area would be the main takeaway from that.
Yeah. And Eva, what did you find the main differences between undergrad and postgrad are?
I would agree. I would say that undergraduate is very, very broad. So you get to learn about many different things and you read very broadly. Whereas if you pursue a master's, for example, your reading will be very specialized. And you get to, I suppose, specialize in a specific area or a topic that you're interested in. So it's not as broad anymore, but it's also very personal. So it depends on, what you're interested in and what you want to take further. So it becomes very specialized, very specific, and it also becomes more intense because during the undergraduate degree, you have many years to learn how to learn academic writing, essays, exams. But then let's say a master's degree, which is usually a year long in the UK, is very intense, and 1 year really does fly by and you don't realize. So there's always things going on. You always have to, keep up with your reading, all the workload, assignments, your dissertation, if you're doing a research course. So there's always things going on. And that's another thing, that you have to be very organized and try to manage your time to be able to stay on top of your work all the time. Whereas this might not be the case, at least not that much during the undergraduate degree.
Yeah, perfect. Darcy, what did you find the main differences?
Yeah, I think echoing a lot of what everyone else has said, but in my specific experience as well, I went from quite an academic essay-based subject, English, into doing a lot of practical journalism, and getting used to being assessed in that sort of style rather than the essay-based was a huge difference for me. And what Eva said also about the fast-paced nature of postgrad. Start of my undergraduate, there's a lot of sort of guidance on essay writing, etc. But going back into my postgrad, you have your induction on the structure of the course, and then you are straight into assessments and lectures. So for me, obviously, I'd just graduated and gone straight back into postgrad, so it wasn't quite a jump, but I guess that's a consideration if you've been out of education for a while, coming back to higher education and getting used to settling back into that sort of way of working.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great point. And Charlie, what would you say the main differences are?
I think a lot of them have been covered. They're more intense. They're harder. Although in a more as Eva in particular touched on, generally challenging you more in areas that you're genuinely interested in. So they're much more specialized, they're much more niche. And there are opportunity for you to really dig deep into a subject that interests you. And I think that's the crucial factor. They are a challenging piece of work. They're particularly challenging if you're doing them part-time alongside alongside work as well. That's also worth bearing in mind. We do have pretty intense master's schedules in the UK, generally doing them in 1 year. They're a big step up in terms of challenge, intellectual and personal, from a first degree. So don't think, oh, I'll take a master's, it'll be just like basically taking another year of my original degree. It won't. It will be a big step up. You'll enjoy it if you enjoy the subject, but it will not be quite as straightforward.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Charlie, we're going to stay with you with what support structures are in place to help postgrad students thrive, especially those returning to study after a break.
So universities do have careers and support services, and those that have large postgrad cohorts have very specific services in place for postgraduates. You've paid for them, go and use them. Use them all. Use them as much as you can. Make your careers and support services work for their pay. And don't feel bad or sheepish about going in. Go in first week. Make yourself known to them, let them know they're going to get to know you, and lean on them, because that's what they're there for. And they are really good at this stuff. They're very professionalized, they're very well prepared, and they offer a level of support you will not get outside of the institution. So do make sure that you use them.
Yeah, definitely. And Jen, what support structures are in place? Can you add to that?
Yeah, sure. So as well as the careers team, who, as Charlie mentioned, can be fantastic. And I would suggest as well, the minute you arrive for your postgraduate, is get in touch with the careers team, because, as you say, it's just a short 1 year usually, but they're really good at kind of helping you progress into your chosen career path. I would also say you have ready networks to tap into. So network with classmates and staff to help build sort of early, strong relationships. Join any sort of study groups, WhatsApp groups, and network with any industry contacts, because some postgraduate subjects can come with placement opportunities. So just wherever you get the opportunity, just make sure you're constantly building that network, and it can help you kind of thrive in your studies. There's also some additional opportunities as well across universities when you look at scholarships. For instance, we have a career change scholarships, which includes an industry mentor. So that would help kind of guide you into whatever career path you're looking to go. So there are kind of initiatives, I'm sure, right across the country with these sort of things. So it's worth having a look at additional things like that as well.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Darcy, over to you for does having a postgraduate qualification boost students' employability?
I can obviously only speak from my experience, but I found that it really helped when applying for jobs specialising in the field I want to go into. So rather than just having the essay-based experience and those sort of skills, I developed more job-ready skills, again, the practical side. But I'd also been networking with the majority of my lecturers were in industry, and obviously based on what I decided to do my assignments on, which is another perk of postgrad, you get to complete assignments on your passions. They were putting me in touch with people in industry that I just would never have met without those contacts. So yeah, the networking side is fantastic. And I think it was Jen who touched on access to internships, conferences, traineeships that I would just never have heard of. And then also the support for applying for these things through your professors and your lecturers is fantastic. And also just from my case as well, I want to mention the scholarship when going to interviews, being able to explain that I'd secured a scholarship and I'd applied for it independently. That was a huge bonus for something that I could say that I'd achieved on my own accord.
Yeah, absolutely. Jen, does having a postgraduate qualification boost students' employability?
Yeah, I mean, I could sit here and say lots of different statistics about, how postgraduates have got lower rate of employment and, better job satisfaction and all these sort of things. But I would say it's more about being employable than about employability, and constantly building on your knowledge to make you more employable as time goes on. So obviously, instead of kind of comparing yourself to someone who's really successful in the industry you want to work in, compare yourself to who you were the day before, and then you'll always win, because you're always learning and growing as you study. So again, you're always building on that, being more employable each day as time goes by.
Yeah, definitely. And Charlie, same question.
So we've got to be quite careful here. I'm going to sound a note of initial caution here. So we've got to be quite careful in the UK. Outside of niche qualifications like Darcy's, for example, that are designed for specific vocations, your average master's course does not open the door to a new set of jobs. There's not a master's labour market in the same way that there is a massive first degree graduate labour market, and in fact there's a PhD labour market as well. There is in other countries, but not in the UK, because of the way that our labour market is structured. So if you take a standard MA in history, say, and this is not to do down history because it's a popular master's course and an enjoyable one to do, what you won't find is that there won't be very many, if any, new jobs that you can apply for. However, the qualities and the time that you spent and the extra maturity that you've got and the extra insight and extra self-knowledge that you've got from that period of study can be extremely valuable to employers, but you do have to articulate it. It won't sell itself. And that's separate. There are other niches. So some of our most difficult jobs to fill are at master's level and highly vocational. So, for example, that simply doesn't apply if you're talking about somebody taking a master's in surveying, for example, because we simply don't have enough surveyors and it's a master's level job, or radiography, or some of the other very important employment niches where we absolutely don't have enough trainees. But in general, your average MA, MSc are valuable in employment terms for the skills that they bring, rather than necessarily the quite niche knowledge that you will have acquired during the course of that qualification. So do be very mindful when you're thinking about this and when you're making your applications, is the Masters simply, it doesn't speak for itself that you have one and therefore that's good. You do need to articulate how and why the experiences and the understanding and the knowledge that you've got during your extra time at university is a benefit to a future employer. But the good news is it's a relatively easy sell.
Yeah, nice. Back to Darcy, were there any surprises or challenges you didn't expect when you started your course?
I think the biggest one for me was the amount of group work that I was taking on in postgrad, and I think the emphasis on that was again to prepare you for the workplace. But I'd gone from, like I say, very much and in English, I'll read a book, write an essay on it, to doing group projects with, like 10 people in a production room, doing live news broadcasts. So that was a challenge in terms of working with people from all over the world and coming together with a certain work style and communication. But I would say again that has boosted my employability because I have those experiences now. And again, another challenge is the independence and the time. It was really nice being able to do projects that were around my passions, but you do have a lot less guidance as you would in undergraduate. So the emphasis is on you really to reach out to your lecturers and your tutors and make those relationships and get support that way. And also I think time, again, we've talked about how it's such a short burst for postgrad, but there's so many additional opportunities you can do in your free time, and it's prioritising which ones would be best suited for your career and your passions, and allow you to actually complete the course to the best of your ability to.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Charlie, any surprises or challenges?
Bearing in mind that I did my qualification quite a long time ago, and actually, like Darcy, I got a scholarship and funding to do both of mine. My big surprise was how much of a step up the Masters was. The PhD I was more prepared for, but the step up in terms of challenge and in terms of the sheer pace of the whole qualification was a bit of a shock. But actually also because we were a smaller group, a smaller, quite intensive group, all doing something that we were genuinely interested in. And I think a lot of people find this. We became much more tight-knit than the average undergraduate group as well. So, we basically got into a little gang and faced this unexpected challenge together. And it was a very, very enjoyable period. PhD is a very different matter, but where it's much more self-guided and much more isolated. But I think that's a separate topic conversation. But the Masters, yeah, I was surprised both by the intensity, but also how well knit the group became. So
Yeah,
very, very enjoyable experience, but hard work. I still remember it 2 years later. So, sorry, I had a cough. Still remember it very well.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you. So we've got one more question left of our set of questions, and then we're going to hand over to Charlie for the presentation. Keep your Q&A questions coming. We've got quite a few piling up, but do keep sending them across into the Q&A box. But just to finish this round of questions, Eva, we're going to come to you. For how do you stay motivated when the workload or financial pressure feels overwhelming?
I think staying motivated is very important when it comes to pursuing postgraduate studies, because as I said, it will get very challenging, it will be very intense. So you will have moments where you feel like you cannot do this anymore, basically. And so at those times, it's very important to have people that you can reach out to. So having your support network, whether that's friends, family, people at the university, your classmates, your professors, someone to talk to. because chances are if you're feeling this way, other people are either feeling this way at the moment or have felt this way before. So that really helps with trying to see that, you know, what you're going through is normal, and it is part of the process. But then that can also motivate you, because you see that when you talk about this to someone else, you understand that you're going through this because you wanted to pursue this degree in the first place. And why was that? Because you had a reason. So it's a way for you to remember your reasons too. And it keeps you motivated because you think, okay, well, I'm here for a reason. And even though times are hard, I have a goal. And so you focus on the end goal, I suppose, and then trying to enjoy the process as well. So especially, you know, spending more time with friends during those times is very important, I would say.
Yeah, fantastic. And Jen, how do you stay motivated when the workload or financial pressure feels overwhelming?
Yeah, I think echoing what was said there about reaching out to people and speaking and making it known how your feelings, you know, what you're feeling and how much pressure you're feeling under. And universities will have wellness teams as well, so make sure to reach out to them. They can help advise on finances, coping strategies for studying, counselling services. You know, so they're there to kind of help for you know, to help kind of ease some of the burden and give you some techniques and tips that can kind of help guide your way through such a challenging time.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you all. We are now going to hand over to Charlie for a short presentation on the current job market. Over to you, Charlie.
See, short. That's the that's the key thing, right? I'm going to talk briefly about the state of the jobs market. I've touched on it already. Now, apologies to everybody who's listening. I am going to go through this quite quickly because I'm going to cover quite a lot in a short space of time, and I'm going to go very broad and not very deep. But do ask questions in the chat. So what's going on right now? You'll have read a lot of newspaper headlines about how terrible the jobs market is for undergraduates, and in general, that's probably affecting some of your thoughts about your next steps. I'm going to try and cut through what's going on exactly. So let's start with where are we right now and what some of the basic stats. So at the end of 2024, there are just over 16.6 million people in the UK workforce with degree or equivalent qualifications, about 54% of the workforce. So the majority of the UK workforce since COVID has had a higher education experience. And that's really, really important to bear in mind and to think about when we're talking about this. It's obviously more prevalent amongst younger workers, but it's still now the majority of the workforce, not the population, but the workforce, have been to university. And the reason is because employers want degrees. Because at the same time, around 53% of all jobs, about 17.3 million, and actually you'll see, although it's 53% as opposed to 54% of workforce, you'll actually see the number of people employed in professional level jobs is higher because the base data for this is higher, because there are people in the UK workforce with qualifications that don't translate well to our framework. They're usually older workers who've taken non-degree qualifications that are now obsolete, or some overseas workers who have generally pre-A level qualifications that fall between what we would consider GCSE and what we would consider A level. It doesn't really touch where degrees are, which fall into a much neater framework. But most jobs in the UK are professional level. You'll notice I've not said degree level because we don't have a definition of what a graduate job is, and we simply don't have the time to discuss that particular question. What we've got is an idea of jobs called professional level, and these are jobs for which a degree is considered sufficient or likely qualification. So most people in the workforce are doing jobs that employers would expect or welcome a degree for those roles. So those are the basic stats. What do new graduates do? So this is this looks like an ostensibly quite complicated graph, but don't worry too much about it, because what's important here is not the numbers but the pattern. You can see that the jobs market did get more difficult last year. Now, this is data for graduates, for all graduates, because they're all surveyed after graduation. Please do fill in the forms when you get them, because this data is hugely useful for future students. It's the data that we use to make a lot of the decisions and about resourcing for careers priorities and student support priorities. So don't think of it as something that's checking up on you on behalf of the student loan company or whatever. They have other channels. This is used by the sector to try and work out what on earth's going on so we can fund the right priorities. So these graduates are surveyed 15 months after graduation. So the last wave of graduates were surveyed at the end of 2024. And you can see that the full-time employment rate went down and the unemployment rate went up because the jobs market started to get noticeably more difficult in the second half of 2024. And I'll get onto exactly why that is. And we're now seeing we've seen a continuation of that, although it appears to have leveled off during this summer, you'll be pleased to hear. So what happened is the jobs market got a little bit worse. Now, what you'll also notice is actually that change isn't massive. And it did get more difficult, but not massively more difficult. In fact, it's about where it was pre-COVID. And I think that's a pretty reasonable summary of where the jobs market is. It's about where it was pre-COVID right now, perhaps a little bit below, but not substantially below. What jobs did graduates do? Well, most of them do jobs that require degrees. I'm going to show you a graph for postgrads as well in a minute, which has the orange bits removed, because those orange jobs there, those categories for orange jobs, are those orange categories are those jobs that don't require a degree level qualification to do or access. So around a quarter to a third of graduates, depending on the year, well, about 30% of graduates in this, so just under 30% of graduates who are working in this particular cohort, slightly under that, were in jobs that didn't require a degree level qualification to do, although quite a lot are in clerical roles that are the sort of roles that are that progress quite quickly and rapidly in career terms into graduate level employment. But what you'll notice is that most graduates start their careers in jobs that require a degree and continue on with that as their careers go on. And of course, 15 months into a career is not very much when you consider that most graduates who graduated at the end of 2024 or in 2024 will still be working in the year 2070. So this is very, very early in people's careers, after less than 2% of someone's career we're looking at. Health is much the most important set of roles because nursing is the most important graduate job in numerical terms. And then we've got business, HR and finance, which is also very important. And then other areas like engineering and education are also crucial to the graduate labour market. Again, don't get too fixated on the exact numbers. They change from year to year, but not much. And that's the crucial thing. Because if we take a look at a comparison of undergraduate and postgraduate outcomes, you'll see that actually postgrads have significantly better outcomes. So you saw before the way that that job market had deteriorated a little bit for first degrees. Well, you can see that actually master's qualifications, although I did say there isn't a specific master's labour market, nevertheless, master's qualifications and master's graduates do substantially better than undergraduates. You can see an unemployment rate half that of undergrads, a significantly greater full-time employment rate, and of course quite a lot going to further study in the PhDs. And then with the PhD qualifications, most of them have jobs. The very large majority have jobs. It's worth mentioning the working and studying category here. These are people who have a full-time job and are also taking some kind of formal qualification, not necessarily in universities, and actually quite a lot of these people are taking professional qualifications. So for example, if you've taken an accountancy degree and you're taking your accountancy qualifications to move on in your career, you'd be in that working and studying category. So all of those people are working full-time and taking qualification alongside and are putting in quite a lot of hours. And actually quite a lot of master's students are in there as they take part-time masters alongside their qualifications. Those people who are just full-time studying are in the studying category. You can see actually that's a smaller group. If you take a look at the jobs graduates are doing, now I've shaved off those non-graduate employment section because for postgraduates, it's not very significant. Now, the first is, I put the doctoral graduates in here just to illustrate how unusual the jobs market is. You're probably wondering immediately, hang on, what's that big green bar in the other professionals? Well, those are PhD graduates who said, I'm a researcher. and then not told us what sort of researcher they are. They're almost all postdoctoral researchers. So they're almost all researchers on fixed term 2-year contracts, usually at universities. But you can see all of a sudden the science area and the education area, because those are the people who said I'm a lecturer, are in there. But actually, it's also worth noting that for the PhD, and I don't want to dwell too much on PhDs, but master's qualifications are an important bridge to the PhD workforce. And the PhD workforce is primarily researchers and people working in R&D, and a substantial amount, possibly even the majority, are not in universities. So if you're thinking, I'll take a master's qualification, and I quite like to do a PhD, but I'm not sure if I want to go into academia, don't worry. That's a very well-established and very common pathway for researchers. What you can see in terms of the master's labour market is you can see the influence of some of the important master's pathways here. So you've got a lot of managers, you've got a lot of people going into business and finance because of the influence of MBA and business masters. You've got a lot going to legal, social welfare because of law and social work. You've still got that important healthcare pathway, but they tend to be specialists, and health specialists, we're short of all of them. So you've got a lot of people doing things like pathology and radiography and radiology and specialist nurses in there. And you've got IT, and you've actually also got the arts and marketing. And in general, there are a lot more people doing these. You can see very healthy representation of all these professions at master's level because of the quality and availability of jobs in all of these roles. So if there is a sector of the economy that you're interested in going in general, master's qualification is a boon if you sell it appropriately. So what's happening right now? So the number of vacancies in the UK is falling at the moment, but it's largely within the margin of error now. It's been pretty flat since about June. So it's been falling in a very, very small way. Thousands looks like loads, but when you've got 717,000 unfilled vacancies, and it's worth stressing that 60% of those vacancies are for people with higher education qualifications, there are in fact proportionally more graduate level vacancies compared to the size of the actual workforce than there are for people without degrees at the moment, although many are for people with experience. So most of these vacancies are for people who've been to university. And that area of the economy doesn't seem to be falling too much. Most of the falls are actually in retail, which is having a difficult time of it and has had a difficult time of it throughout 2025. The student employers who look after graduate training schemes reckon actually hiring has gone down by about 5%. Not a huge fall, but it is down a bit. But some of that is due to switching from graduate programs to apprenticeship programs, which are still open to graduates anyway. So it's a change in focus as businesses think about their training and employment priorities and the way that they want to focus their scarce training budgets. You've probably heard that the graduate jobs market was crashing. This is a complicated looking graph, but some of the key features are extremely important. This is a graph of vacancies across the UK economy since the year 2001. You can probably see where COVID was. That massive drop followed by that huge rise. What a lot of people don't get is the effect of COVID over the medium term was in fact to massively boost vacancies, because a lot of people left the workforce, particularly older workers, due to ill health. And also remote working was extremely effective and required quite a bit of reconfiguration of businesses. And what businesses were getting right, they underhired to start with, then everybody tried to recruit at once. And then it took till around summer 2024 for the graduate labour market to actually calm down. And it's almost all graduates, largely in London. Then in 2024, something happened. I'm going to go on to that in the next slide. But what's actually happening now is the graduate jobs market is not crashing. It's returning to long-term trend. And that's basically what has happened over the last 12 to 18 months. It looks like it's come down, but it's come down off a post-COVID sugar rush. But what did happen in 2024 is AI. Now, what AI has not done to any great extent, as far as a lot of people who've looked at this in a great deal of detail, right up to and including the Bank of England itself, there doesn't seem to be a lot of substitution of jobs going on in the UK at the moment. There might be some in the US, but in the UK, it's not really happening. What has happened instead is AI has massively impacted the recruitment market. So fundamentally, if you think of the way that recruitment works, you fill in an application of some kind, and it takes ages, and then the recruiter goes and looks at it. Well, AI is actually quite good at writing applications, and it does it really, really quickly. And so what's happened, and it really started to upscale in 2024, and the big recruitment round at the start of summer, as education leavers of all kinds, but particularly university graduates, left schools and colleges in the summer of 2024, the big applications round came in. What employers noticed is, firstly, they were having 10 to 50 times more applicants than usual. So a massive, massive increase. Everybody was using AI. So they were actually of better quality than usual, because AI writes decent applications. And if you're not used to writing a job application, and you find it difficult or daunting, AI can do a pretty good job of it. It takes seconds, literally. There are tools that you can get at scale that will go through your entire job vacancy folder and apply for all the jobs automatically. So employers were inundated with these better applications. They couldn't sift them in the ways that they were used to, but the applications were all effectively identical. And so the initial candidate sift that takes place, where you go through the applications, couldn't happen. It did not happen. So employers were reporting we've seen 50-fold increases in candidates and no increase in actual good ones. All that's happened is that the poor candidates are much better at hiding it now. So what happened is, essentially, everybody spent their recruitment budgets, or had their recruitment budgets spent for them in the initial round. Massively impacted hiring throughout the rest of 2024, and has made recruiters reluctant and shy of recruiting as they try to figure out what on earth to do, because there is no easy solution to this. Some recruiters have set the robots on the robots and now use robot sifting to sift the robot candidates, but I think by and large most of them are well aware that that doesn't really work. So they're doing a lot of this stuff by hand now, which takes a lot longer and costs a lot more, and not many recruiters have had increased recruitment budgets to compensate. So what's happening? So around 40% of businesses with more than 10 workers were saying during the summer, we're actually short of employees and we're struggling to recruit, but we can't because it costs too much at the moment. Another factor was the increase in national insurance rises and national living wage in 2020, in the budget in 2024. Now, the national living wage going up is a public good, but it did cost employers a lot of money. And when your recruitment budgets are being hit all over, that makes a difference on your ability and willingness to recruit. So what actually seems to have happened is AI has hit the market like a ton of bricks. It has not actually benefited anybody at all. Candidates find it much harder because they're up against much more competition. Businesses find it much harder because it's sifting recruiters. It's not helped anyone really, which is all a bit sad, but it's there and it's here to stay. But there's a lot of pent-up demand. If businesses can find things a little bit easier or get cost reduced, many of those businesses that were short of workers but are finding it hard to recruit will probably see that dam bursting, and we might see another surge of recruitment. The downside is I can't see an easy path to that happening. In terms of long-term demand, it remains true that over the long term, much of the UK's employment demand are for people with post-18 qualifications. There is a little bit more of a shift to college and apprenticeship employment, but actually, nevertheless, even the government's own projected demand, say 52% of new jobs created will be for degrees, so it's pretty much on long-term trend. So even though there's an attempt to reconfigure away from university as the main pathway, market demands mean that universities will still remain the main pathway into the jobs market. So we're not going to see any significant fall in graduate demand over the next few years, and those qualifications will remain valuable. There we go. That was a very, very brief tour through what's going on. Hope that was useful. So yeah. Anybody got any questions? Oh, I see. What subject areas you studied? Shall I answer that right now? I could open it up to see if people can guess, because I bet they can't. But I'll tell you, I'm a chemist. My master's degree was environmental chemistry, and my PhD is in analytical chemistry.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that. That was genuinely really useful. I hope you all found that helpful. So we are going to move now into our live Q&A. So panelists, if you feel like you're able to answer a question, just raise your hand and I'll come to you. So we're going to kick off. What are the best ways for finding a scholarship? Darcy.
So I actually found mine through Instagram of Newcastle University. I think it came up as an ad on stories, but I wasn't 100% sure what I wanted to do after my undergraduate, and this was probably at the very start of my final year. So I saw the scholarship because I think I'd been under the impression that to do a postgraduate I was going to get myself in so much more debt. How was I going to afford to live near the uni? How was I going to afford to study? So that kind of opened the door to me, really. So social media, but also just the university's websites. Every university has a page where they list pretty much all their funding options, bursaries. Some of them you automatically enrolled into anyway, such as bursaries for certain circumstances through student finance, other ones you have to apply for. But it's worth just doing a really basic Google search at first, see what's there. And also just emailing tutors. If you know what course you want to do, I was in touch with the head of the course as soon as I saw the scholarship, and she kind of guided me through the process before it even opened for that year, because I knew that that's exactly what I wanted to do. So, you know, reaching out to the lecturers in that subject and just saying what's open for me to be able to do this.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. So, is university status genuinely relevant when qualifying for a master's? And we've had a similar question. Does it matter if you attend a Russell Group university or not for postgraduate study?
So that's an interesting question. It matters less than it used to. It did used to matter a lot more, and I think that's because most of the particularly in terms of work experience and practical training, employers have had plenty of time now to get used to the newer institutions and are aware that they are very good and often very innovative and pioneering and that kind of thing. If you're doing, and particularly if you're thinking of going to take a research-led postgraduate qualification, the Russell Group institutions still have the bulk of funding and the highest profile researchers. So that's something to think about, particularly if you want a career in academia. But it's a lot less important than it used to be, and particularly in niche areas, a lot of institutions have very high quality specialisms, and it can depend even on individual academics or course leaders. So it's less of a concern than it used to be. Can't say it's not completely. There are still some snobbish employers out of there who have quite old-fashioned views about what a good university is. I can't pretend that's not the case, but largely savvy employers now know that most of the universities in the UK are all pretty good at what they're doing, and many of them have their own strengths and are particularly good in certain areas. And that's particularly important in local labour markets as well. Employers in general will be aware that if they're recruiting in Liverpool, for example, somebody from Liverpool or a graduate of the Liverpool institution is more likely to stay with them. Statistically, it's extremely well evidenced, and they know that kind of thing, and they're very well aware of that kind of thing.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. Can you study? Oh, sorry, Eva, did you want to add to that?
Sorry. Yeah, just adding to that. From my experience, so I studied at Oxford, but when I was applying for some jobs, I did notice that some recruiters were specifically and very explicitly asking applicants to not mention where they studied. So you would put what you studied, just so the degree, maybe even the grade you received, even that was optional, but you should not put the institution where you studied at. So I am aware of, some people who do not want to know, so that they're not biased in the recruitment process.
Yeah, that's really good to know. Thank you. That's perfect. So, can you study a completely different subject at postgrad as you did to your undergrad?
I mean, I can answer this one again. I guess it was slightly related in the sense that it was writing based, some of it. But I went from English to something quite niche that was international multimedia journalism that I had no experience of before. And one of my friends on my courses had done marine biology as an undergrad and then was on my journalism course. So I mean, obviously there's some exceptions. Some courses will have prerequisites, but and certainly on my course, I guess it just depends on what you want to study and the transferable skills you've learned at undergrad.
Yes, that's a great point. Jen, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, similar to what Darcy was saying there, actually, you've really got to be a bit sensible with what you want to move into and have a look at the skills that you've kind of gained from your undergraduate degree. Obviously, you'll get a lot of subjects that are very technical, where you might need a high level of certain subjects, whether it's maths or a certain science that you might need. So obviously, you've got to keep that in mind and be a bit sensible in terms of where you want to go. But also, if you've got relevant work experience, that can also come into play for some postgraduate degrees as well. So if you've taken a bit of a break and went into the working for a while, the universities will take that into account as well.
Yeah, that's great. And Charlie?
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, universities do not want to don't want people enrolling on courses that they're not going to succeed in. So, but there are lots of relationships between courses that are not immediately obvious. So I think the most sensible thing to do is, if you're thinking of doing a particular course, have a chat with the course leaders. Don't be too hung up on the fact that you might have done something that ostensibly looks quite different. Your main aim will be to make it clear to the people administering the course that you can do this course, you will complete it and succeed at it. And fundamentally, if you can do that and you can make the case, there's no reason why you shouldn't take the opportunity afforded by masters to perhaps move your career in a slightly different direction. And there are conversion courses to actually specifically convert into specific career paths. And to be honest, there probably ought to be more of them, because a lot of the career paths that are offered in this way are in short supply. So, for example, you might want to convert to engineering or to healthcare from a different path, and they're positively encouraged.
Yeah, great. This is sort of a financial question. Student finance does not fund after 60 years old. So what are other options if you want to study a master's? Is there sort of anything out there beyond that 60-year-old age limit that we're aware of? And if not, we can try and... Oh, yes, Jen.
Yeah, it's just to say, for all there's maybe not government loans and things like that. I know certainly at Heriot-Watt, our scholarships don't have an age restriction on there, so it's worth having a look at the scholarships that are available for different universities. I would also say as well, there's different payment options as well, so it might not always be, you'll get a loan, but there are different opportunities depending on the university you go for, to pay in instalments as well. So it's worth having a look at that to see if that would help your financial situation.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. What are the pros and cons of either option, continuing to study or going into work and then considering a master's after? We've sort of touched on this throughout the webinar, but can anyone think of specific pros and cons of either going straight into work or going straight into a master's? Charlie?
So fundamentally, one of the big pros of going into work, obviously, is that you start earning straight away, but you may ultimately run across two hurdles. The first is, especially when you're earning full time, it's quite hard to give that up or to compromise that in order to go and do study. And by doing that, you may be limiting you may potentially limit your future options. So those are some of the balances. The cons of going into study as opposed to as opposed to working, obviously you will be less well off. And in a time where cost of living is very much a factor, that can often be the deciding factor. And it's a perfectly reasonable deciding factor to consider. So, you know, you've got those areas. Postgraduate study is not a guarantee of a good job or a better job than you would have had you not taken it, but it does give you more options. And of course, it's also worth stressing most people who take postgraduate study are taking a course in a subject that they enjoy and find enjoyable and want to devote time to, and it just gets harder to do as you get more responsibilities as you get older. And so there's always that to bear in mind. You think at some point you might want to do a master's. It does get harder as you get older, so that's the thing to bear in mind.
Yeah, thank you, Jen.
Yeah, so just kind of touching on what Charlie was saying there about it getting hard. It does get harder to come back after a break, but there are things in place as well that can help. Like, for instance, you can have part-time options. There's online learning, so there's a lot of flexibility, especially given obviously COVID wasn't the greatest thing, but it's helped kind of move a lot of courses online now as well. So as well as online courses that you can do in your own time while you're working, you can have part-time courses where you're spreading the workload over 2 years as well. So there is that option. I mean, for going into study straight after your undergraduate degree is obviously it's fresh in your mind. You're used to studying. It's not as big as a kind of mental leap, if you like, instead of having that break and then coming back. Yeah. So yeah, it's just what suits you as well. I mean, you might want to dip your toe in the kind of working life and, as you say, earning money. A postgraduate degree obviously costs money. You might want to go and work for a bit to save up some money to come back, and it gives you an idea as well whether or not the undergraduate degree that you've studied is the kind of career path you want to pursue. So yeah, it's just, you know, that it's down to yourself really to kind of to make that decision. It's hard to kind of navigate that, but yeah, there's lots of pros and cons to each option.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we're moving into the final 4 minutes of the webinar. Once you leave, a survey will pop up, and if you're able to take a couple of minutes just to give us some feedback on today's webinar, we'd really appreciate that. Remember to sign up to prospects.ac.uk for free for more of this advice. We've got plenty of articles on there that hopefully will attack some of your questions, because we have a flurry of them coming in. The webinar has been recorded, so you'll all get a link on demand after it's completed, so you can rewatch it and share it with friends and family if you want to do that. And as we've got so many questions, we might even try and get them answered by the panelists outside of the webinar, and we'll post them somewhere and let you know. But in the meantime, we're going to quick fire. I'm going to try and get through as many as is possible. So sharp, short answers as where you can, guys. What postgraduate subjects do you think will offer the best prospects in terms of a decent salary and career advancement? The winning question. What should we all be studying in order to win? Charlie?
Surveying.
Sorry?
Surveying.
Oh, surveying. Perfect.
Yeah,
there you go.
It's the most difficult job to fill in the UK.
Oh, interesting.
And it's a postgraduate level role.
So
that's what I would suggest to anybody.
Perfect. So surveying. I'm considering a 3-year part-time master's in counselling. Does anyone have any experience working a main job while taking a 1 day a week to study a master's? So I don't know that explicitly works with anyone here on the panel, but Darcy, do you have advice?
Yeah, so my master's was full-time, but I was working 2 days a week full-time in high school at the same time as doing my master's degree. So in terms of balancing that, I would say make a realistic schedule for yourself and constantly be reflecting on what you can do to minimize your stress. There was a lot of times where I would be starting an assignment 2 weeks before the rest of my peers were, because I knew that I had half term then and I didn't have the time nearer the assignment deadline. But I think it's just about accountability really, and I think if you can balance both, then that's also great transferable skills for taking into the job market, being able to say that you've balanced, you know, such big commitments at the same time and still come out with a really great qualification.
Yeah, absolutely. I've spoken to somebody about this before as well, and they really highlighted the importance of your well-being. So keep up your running, go to the gym, carve that time out in the week to keep your body and your mind healthy and physically fit. There are so many different career paths out there, and sometimes it's even hard to know what jobs actually exist. What's the best way to discover what's available and figure out what might suit us without having to try every single role, as this is not possible? I'm going to jump in and say prospects.ac.uk, but
Okay, I'll put my hand down. That's exactly what I was going to say.
we do. We have lots of job profiles on there. We have a job match quiz that you can go and take, and it will give you ideas of what type of industry or sector you might want to move into. And as I say, we have podcast episodes, videos, and articles that cover millions of jobs that, as you say, you might not have ever even heard of before. So prospects.ac.uk, I'd really recommend starting there, and then perhaps moving over.
Oh, can I say something very, very quickly, Emily? It's also okay to feel that way, because the jobs market is incredibly complicated. So don't feel bad that you've no idea what you want to do. It all looks incredibly daunting. It is for everybody.
Absolutely. So we are now at 2 o'clock. I'm going to give us one more question. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of them today. Thank you so much for sending your questions. As I say, I am going to send them across and try and get them answered for you, and we'll post them somewhere. But the final question for today, following the AI spike, how would you suggest we make our CVs and applications for jobs stand out to make us more recruitable?
So there are two ways to do that. The first is learn to write a really good CV without AI, an application without AI, and your career service will help you with that. And the second way is learn how to write a really good application with AI, and your career service will help you with that as well. If you can use the tools to the power of good, that will really make you stand out.
Okay, excellent. Jen?
Just a quick one for me, it's making contacts and networking as well. It's who you know a lot of the time. So if they know your face and they know your name, then you're already off to a head start.
Absolutely. Darcy?
Yeah, just a final point would be your experience is what's going to make you stand out the most. So, AI can tailor that and write it in a really concise way, but if you've done something that the other candidates haven't, that's obviously going to make you stand out to employers. So just try and go for, whether it's voluntary, paid, everything you can to get into that sort of sector.
Yeah, absolutely. That's brilliant. I'm so sorry we don't have time for the rest of your questions today. As I say, the webinar has been recorded and you will get the link on demand, and we will try and answer these questions in our own time and post them on the website. We'll let you know once we do that. Prospects.ac.uk for lots of information on some of these questions. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching today. Thank you so much to the panelists. We hope that you found this useful. Thank you all so much for coming, and have a great rest of your day.